Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Ashraf Rizvi, who is the founder of Glided and Digital Swiss Gold. Hi, Ashraf. Welcome to ELI.
Hi, Priya. Thanks for having me on the program. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. So my name is Ashraf Rizvi, and I'm the founder and CEO of Gilded. We're a company that started about 3 years ago. And what we do is we make physical gold ownership functional. And by that, I mean that we make it digital, mobile, and usable so that physical gold can behave just like cash, but better. Maintain that store of value, help support people's purchasing power, be that physical asset that people know and trust as the ultimate store of value for 3,500 years, but have all the functionality of money at the end of the day.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about Gilded, and we'll talk about me and my history and the story of how we got here during the conversations. Looking forward to that.
Sure. So before we start discussing anything, can you tell us in detail what is fractional gold ownership and how does it work?
Yeah, sure. That's it's a good question. So this is something that's very particular to commodities and doesn't really exist in financial markets. So what fractional ownership means is that you can own a part of a bar. So let's say, for example, a 100-gram bar or 1 kg bar. You can own 10 grams of it or 20 grams, or you can own the entire bar. In either case, that asset belongs to you. And so that's something that's very particular to commodities where even owning part of an asset, it can still be your title and your property. And the reason that's important is because that makes it bankruptcy remote or bankruptcy proof, and because it's your asset. It's so like your car or your bicycle or your shoes or your house, it's your asset. As opposed to, for example, what is known as fractional reserve banking, which is when you put money in a bank, the money actually becomes the property of the bank and not you. They give you an IOU that they'll return it back to you. And if they don't, then you become a creditor and you have to go, stand in line to collect any money that might be left over. So that's how fractional reserve banking works, as opposed to physical ownership, and that's what we provide. You become the physical owner of the property, which in this case is either the entire bar or a fractional bar of the gold.
Okay. Now tell us how does the venture that you have built help people to own the gold in a virtual way?
So what we make possible at Gilded is that we allow people to use a mobile app, or even we have an enterprise app as well. And you can use that mobile app to you go in, you can create an account relatively easily, and then complete a simple KYC AML that is required because you're purchasing an asset. And then you can acquire the gold that you want in as little as 1 gram. The gold is sourced directly from Switzerland, so the Swiss refineries, and then that gold is held or moved into a vault at Brinks in Zurich. It's fully insured. It's audited. Every single bar with all its details. All bars have a serial number. They have a certificate of authenticity. They have the stamp of the refinery. And on the certificate, they even tell you what date it was manufactured. All of that information is captured on location, and we provide the pictures of all of that evidence to each of the owners of the gold in the bar in terms of how much do they own of that bar, all the specific details. And we also record that information on the blockchain, not a Bitcoin or Ethereum blockchain like a cryptocurrency, but we keep that so that it's immutably recorded that it's yours. That's all independently audited. So the gold is independently audited, that it's in the vault and it's real. Your ownership is independently audited, that your ownership to that specific bar Your personal information is never recorded on the blockchain. It's kept separate. So your account number is linked to that bar ownership. And you can see all of that information right on the mobile app. And you can also see it on the enterprise app. In our case, because of the rules in India, you can't import the gold into India like you can in certain countries without paying additional fees. So that means you can take, of course, physical ownership in Switzerland or some other place where you might have bank account or residence, but you can sell it anytime. It's 24/7. So you can buy anytime, sell anytime. There's always a price available. And we access the overall London marketplace, which is one of the biggest global markets. So trades between 40 and $50 billion worth of gold on a daily basis. So it's very liquid. You don't have to worry about, will you be able to exit if you want? And then we're working on other features like the ability to perhaps borrow against the asset without having to sell it, or yield enhancement strategies where you can earn a return on your gold. And so these are all things that we're working on in the future.
Speaking of blockchain and cryptocurrency, I have one interesting thought in my mind. Uh, can you comment upon the fact that how gold is losing its space to crypto? If you look at the human history, gold has been a good way to store value or wealth. But now cryptocurrency is also competing into the same space where people are storing their wealth or value in crypto. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Priya. So I think what's happening here is that we're going through a period of extraordinary change where financial assets are increasing in value tremendously. And the reason they're increasing so rapidly is because currencies are being devalued very quickly by governments. And the reason they are, of course, it partially is driven by COVID, but has been going on now for the last 20 years, is governments are issuing tremendous amounts of debt. And no country more than the United States, where the deficits are in the trillions of dollars now. But this is happening everywhere, whether it's in the US or it's in Europe or it's in India, or most every country has significantly increased their debt to GDP ratios. As an example, the US from 1970 to 2000 was running between 50 and 60% debt to GDP and is now 130. So in 20 years, it's more than doubled. So I think that's creating tremendous devaluation of currency itself. And given the massive amount of currency that's been printed, that naturally tends to cause financial assets to appreciate. And so whether we're talking about stocks or bonds or companies that have little or no revenues, having very large valuations, or even cryptocurrencies, of which there's now 60,000 plus cryptocurrencies, all appreciating in price. And so this is not that different than I think what we have seen in the past. We saw that in the early 1900s, 1920s. We've seen it at different periods of history, of course, in the 1990s with the dot-com bubble. I believe that that's what's really happening, is we're seeing this financial asset bubble. But if we look through history, usually the way these financial bubbles finish is not well. They usually blow up. This one will, I think, as well in due course. And we could end up in a period much more like the 1970s, which was a period of significant inflation. And when that happens, then that's exactly when people turn to gold, because it's not a financial asset, it's a physical asset, store of value. Or even in the 2000s, after the dot-com bubble, gold did extremely well when financial assets did very, very poorly. So I think it's always useful to remind ourselves financial markets history. It's very easy to think that somehow crypto is replacing gold. I don't think that's happening in any material way. Remember, the gold market in aggregate is over $12 trillion, and the entire crypto market is about 3 trillion. And but there's also a fine wine market, and there's a whole market for sneakers and for gin and all sorts of assets that are hard assets. And that's, I think, art. That's only logical. People are just saying, I want to have some assets that are not just fiat currency, and crypto just happens to be one of them. But I think it is more financially driven than it is driven in the same way that gold has been for 3,500 years. And that will only come out, of course, in due time when we actually see how things transpire over the next years or decades.
Interesting. I have one more question around that. Why do you think gold has been a consistent uh, way to store wealth throughout the human history when other competing asset classes have come and gone? Why gold has persisted and is still appreciating every day?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I think that's fundamental to the understanding of that economic history. So part of it has to do with the fact that there's a limited supply, and it grows only at a small amount. You can only take so much gold out of the ground, so that's part of it. Of course, there's a limited supply of lots of assets. There's so that just being a limited supply doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes the currency of choice or over human history. So that's one, but that's one factor. A second factor is that it's something people know and trust and love and want as part of their. It's in India or in China or many countries. It's part of the fabric of the culture. It's about it's culturally important. It's economically important. It has many uses at the end of the day, and so there's a real need or demand for it at the end of the day. It's not just something you make up. So that's a second reason. A third reason is that it's nobody's liability. So a government can always print a lot more rupees or dollars or sterling or any currency that they choose because it's just paper. And if they want to manufacture, if they want to manufacture 10 times more to this next week than they did last week, they can do that. You can't do that with gold, of course. So that again is no one person can control it at the end of the day. I think another element that's very important is it's so widely held. So billions of people on the planet own gold. It's the single most widely held financial asset in the entire world by a long shot. If you think about what are the other assets that are widely held, Indian rupees, Chinese renminbi, US dollars. But even in all of these cases, no more than a billion and a half people own it typically. In the case of gold, most every Indian owns it. Most every Chinese person owns it. Most people in Southeast Asia own it. Most people in Turkey, most people in the Middle East. So we're talking about 3, 4, 5 billion people who own gold in some way, in shape or form, either in the form of jewelry, bars or coins, but even ETFs, gold bonds, et cetera, all these different mechanisms. If you compare that to any of the other assets, it's not even close. And I think that is also a significant difference between gold and cryptocurrency. Although maybe millions of people own cryptocurrency, a very small percentage, 2% to 3% own 90% of it. So it's very, very concentrated. That is exactly the opposite of gold. Actually, just in India alone, Indians own $1.5 trillion of gold, and but there's no one party. The U.S. government is the single largest owner at about 500 billion, but that's only 5% of the entire, less than 5% of the entire value of gold. Whereas with things like cryptocurrencies, 2% of the people own 90% of all the holdings. So it's very concentrated. And so I think that's a very big difference at the end of the day. But those I think are some of the key reasons is limited supply, inability to print on one person's desire or a group like a Federal Reserve. The fact that it has a use and a purpose and it has for 3,500 years, economic and cultural importance, all of these things I think weigh into that equation. And then of course, trust is something that's built over a very long period of time, and 3,500 years is a pretty long period of time. Remember, gold predates almost all currencies in the world, actually all currencies.
So true. Uh, now, now that we have a context on why gold and what is the true significance of gold, please tell us about how you built this venture, which is primarily about making gold accessible to everyone. So, can you please tell us what was the initial idea and how did you, in first few days, assemble a team to build this venture?
Yeah. So Priya, I think I've been preparing my whole life for this opportunity in some sense. So I, I think there's a couple elements that are really important. So first is so I'm you know, a second generation Indian immigrant. My parents migrated in the 1970s, and so there's a link there that I'll talk about. And then the second is I've been a financial markets person for 30 plus years. And so I had an opportunity to be heavily involved in the financial markets and think about how they work and where they let people down. So both of those really contributed to that. And maybe the final piece is that I wanted to, at this stage in my career, I really wanted to do something to help people across the world that could have an impact on them in a positive way in terms of helping them with their plan for their financial futures and that of their children and their family members. So I think those were the three big components. And so let me break it down into each of those. One, my parents moved to the US in the 1960s. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and I can remember my parents sending money back home. My dad was one of the older ones in the family, and so he was sending money home to his brothers and sisters. And it was very expensive to do, one. And I remember this that in back then in around 1970, the price of gold was $35 to an ounce, and the price of rupees to the dollar was about 7.5 rupees to the dollar. And so I thought about that many, many years later and said, wow, look, today the rupee is 75 rupees to the dollar and gold is $1,850 to the ounce. And so that shows us how much the rupee has devalued
Mm.
relative to gold over the last 50 years. And so that, you know, I think helps explain why so many Indians and people all over the world buy gold, because it serves as a store of value and as a great hedge against inflation. And so that actually turns out for the average Indian, since 1971, if you bought gold when President Nixon in the US removed the convertibility of gold, of dollars to gold, about a return of 9% per year for 50 years. That's pretty good. So that's really important to understand. The second is I had the opportunity to work at the three biggest Swiss banks, Credit Suisse, Swiss Bank Corporation, UBS. I ran the global metals and commodities businesses. I ran the emerging markets FX business. I ran fixed income businesses for credit products in repo. And I even started an investment management firm after I left UBS that grew to managing a few $1 billion for clients. And so I'd learned a lot about financial markets and how to do that. And I thought I could apply that to something where I could make a valuable asset available to people. And so that really helped that. And then the last piece was I really thought gold has been operating in the same way for really 3,500 years. You go to the store, you buy it, you take it home, you keep it safe. You have to worry about, is somebody going to steal it and insure it, all that sort of stuff. But why couldn't we leverage 21st century technology of a mobile phone, which most people have now, a app, and even blockchain, to use that 21st century technology and apply it to gold and make it possible for you to own a fractional part of it anywhere in the world and have it right on your device. Today, more and more people use their mobile device to move money. They use it to keep their credit cards, their debit cards, their you know, their personal lives in terms of their pictures. And so why not use that 21st century technology to do that? And so I really brought all those things together. And it was my third startup. I had already, my first startup was right out of university. So after I graduated from the Wharton School, I started a company that traded on the floor, and that grew before we merged with a bigger company. My second startup was in 2009, right in the middle of the financial crisis. I started an asset management firm, which grew to managing a few $1 billion for clients. And this is the third. So I really knew already how to do it and how to assemble a team and I already had people that I could go to who wanted to be part of that project. And so it was relatively, for me, it was much easier than maybe for a lot of others because I already knew what kind of the basic roadmap or blueprint was, the kind of people that I would need in the beginning. And we started with a relatively small team of 5 people or so, and then went from there. And over time, of course, then we've grown, and now we're over 100 people in 8 different countries, 12 different states, and we work fully remotely at this point in time. So that's 3 years later, but it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight.
Right. Tell us about the team that have helped you to execute this plan and vision.
So I think that's a very important way to frame it. It's always about a team. It's never about an individual. It's true. I'm the front person as the founder and the CEO, and I'm the one who does the interviews and the speaking on stage at various locations, and so all of that. So I'm clearly the most visible person within the firm, but none of that would be possible without the all the colleagues and team members who are part of the team who make it happen. And so we have people who are responsible for the day-to-day running, the day-to-day marketing, the day-to-day HR needs, the operations, the running of the finances, the all of these things, the technology development, the product design, all of these are important parts of what the firm does, and there are different people who are very skilled in their own capacity in what they do there to bring that all to life. And then of course, in the end, it's always about the clients. We have to see what is the feedback that we're getting from clients on the product that we're producing, and how can we make it better. I think one of the things that we learned early on, and there's always a learning, even if you've started a company a few times, is that you always make mistakes. It's part of life at the end of the day, and those mistakes tend to be very useful. You can learn a lot from them. And so that I've never felt like mistakes are a problem. You should make mistakes. If you didn't make any mistakes, you probably weren't taking enough chances or risk either. You're being too conservative. Too many mistakes or too big of mistakes can also be problematic. So that means you're not learning and you're not improving. And particularly if you make really big mistakes, then that can drive you out of business, or some, have, pretty big negative repercussions, violating laws, or, doing something that the government doesn't want. So I think those are important to bear in mind. But I think feedback from clients on how's your product, does it solve that problem, right? The initial problem that you identified and the solution, is that really happening? Or do you need to pivot a little bit slightly in order to address the real solution that people want to the problem that maybe you thought was there, but actually the problem is a little different. So I think constantly thinking about that and understanding what the client wants, I think is a critical part of what any entrepreneur should be thinking about all the time. Is, of course, you shouldn't be changing your strategy every day or every week. That can't be the case. But you should be thinking about, am I really solving the problem that exists, or am I solving a problem that I think exists but doesn't actually exist?
Okay. Uh, what we usually see, one of the key challenges for a consumer facing business, especially for a business that has a mobile app, is gathering initial few users or customers. So can you tell us, how did you find the first few people to say that the product is market fit and they found value in it?
Yeah, so our approach was very much B2C initially. Our first product launch, soft launch, was in India actually, and then we've gone into other countries as well: Southeast Asia, Middle East, Turkey. And initially, we thought we would be largely a B2C company, and we made it available. We went through social media. Obviously, digital gold was something that was starting to become more relevant in India. Well, most people still buy the physical asset and take it home. That still hasn't changed, and I don't think that will change for quite some time. But I thought it was a really good test case because Indians have historically wanted to hold the physical asset. Um, and I was, reminded of the fact that actually Indians have behaved the same way with currency as well. Historically, they've wanted to keep their currency in their own possession. The banking system is not nearly as developed in India as in a lot of places where people often didn't trust banks to keep their money and things like that. And then, of course, um, over the last 5, 6 years, India has gone through this very tremendous transformation where people are now using their mobile phones or to move money relatively easily from A to B on a peer-to-peer basis, and doing it all digitally. So India has very rapidly moved to the digital age with regards money, probably only second to China on a worldwide basis, but I would say well ahead of the United States. And so on that basis, I really thought this is probably what's going to happen in gold too, is that it will move over time from this physical ownership to this digital ownership as well, because you can have all the properties that you want. And in fact, you can have so many other things because now you don't have to worry about keeping it home and storage and insurance and large fees to be able to sell it and all of that sort of stuff, because now you can do it all from your mobile device. And so those were all good reasons, I thought, for us to test that. We saw hundreds of thousands of downloads, lots of users. We got good feedback. Said you should do this. This should be better. This is not good. So we made improvements, and we started to move, the product along. And we've had now many iterations of generational releases. We've launched in various countries. But what we also understood over that period was that the B2C market can be very, very challenging in that you'll end up spending a lot of money to acquire customers. So the cost of customer acquisition, or CAC, can be very high. And so we've seen this, for example, in India. A very relevant one these days is Paytm, where they've spent billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars to acquire 400 million customers. And so that's a business decision that you have to make. Is that right for you? And for them, it was the right way to go. But it may not be the right way to go for every other company at the end of the day. And I really felt like that wasn't the right solution for us. And we also, as a result of producing the mobile app solution, what started to happen is that as I showed it to banks and other financial institutions, many of them got very interested in it and how they could use it to offer it to their clients, for example, their wealth management clients or their private banking clients. And so they indicated interest in partnering. And so now what we have done is we've moved and pivoted as an organization where we're spending less time and effort on the B2C market, although we still believe in that, but we're not as aggressive about that as the primary mechanism. And we're much more focused on the B2B and the B2B2C, where we can reach the end consumer through financial institutions. And so we've started to partner with a number of banks, which we'll be able to announce in the coming months. But we have now banks in the United States, we have banks in the Middle East who we're partnering with, and I would expect that we'll have banks in India and in Southeast Asia as well who will partner with, where we'll deliver the product directly to their client base, be powered by us. So I think that, and also not only did we see that happen at the bank or financial institution level, but even at companies, and we have some governments that want to use it to make the payments to their workers, or even for cross-border payments. So I feel like the opportunities that presented themselves after we created the early MVPs and testing really increased a lot as you get out in the marketplace in the field. And it goes back to what I said, is that, see what is the problem that you're solving for the end customer, and who's really the end customer. And so I think this is part of the learning of what has happened over the past few years. Went from a B2C business towards more a B2B and a B2B2C business.
Okay. Also, can you tell us what is the current scale of operation and what kind of North Star metric that we measure on a day-to-day basis to know where we are going?
So our main metric right now is partnerships that we can establish with institutions. Um, that's the main metric I think about, because I think that is how we ultimately measure our reach and ability to reach people, and the quality of the organizations that want to partner with us. And so what I see happening here is that we have major financial institutions that are leaders in their own geography or in their country who want to partner with us. So I feel very good about that. So that's now we have about 10 different institutions that we're partnering with that would have their client base would exceed 25 million clients. So that's, I think, very, very good. And I feel very good about that, because we would not be able to reach 25 million clients on our own on a B2C basis.
Mm.
And many of these clients are all the way from retail to high net worth or ultra high net worth. So that's a very wide swath of clients that we wouldn't be able to reach singularly by ourselves. The second thing that I really look at is what is the interest and what is the feedback from governments or regulators? How do they feel about your product? Because if you're doing something that's not going to be favored by them, and some of the cryptocurrencies suffer from that, there's always this risk that you might do something in the short term that looks like you're being successful, but then you'll get shut down.
Right.
And so making sure that we're in line with regulatory environments and governments feel good about what we're doing, that we're doing it the right way, I think is very important. And so I actually spend quite a lot of time in those sort of discussions with government leaders and at the government level and the regulator level. That what is the product that we're building? Why is that useful? Why is that not a bad thing for governments? Why is that good in terms of for the end users and the clients? And so really focus a lot of time and energy on that. So that's a second big metric. And then the third metric I think is for us is, are we seeing this positive trend in people wanting to support what we're doing and our mission by either becoming consumers or investors or other ways to help the firm realize its ambitions and its goals. And we see that in that we've never really had to worry about raising money or anything like that. We're very well funded. We have 2 years of runway, and we're still growing. We're adding between 50 and 75 people in this coming next 6 months or so to meet the demand that we have at the end of the day. So these are also things that are important, because that's something entrepreneurs always worry about is, do I have enough money to pay my people and all of these sort of things? So that's not something I worry that much about. I focus more on those first two things. But those are kind of the three big things that I think about in terms of big metrics. But the main North Star metric is, are we getting more and more traction with institutions who want to partner with us? Because I really believe we're in the B2B and B2B2C model.
Okay. I'm also curious to know, how did COVID impact the business or the industry we're operating in? Especially, I think COVID accelerated the digital adoption in many industries. Uh, so, how did it play out for you?
I think we were very similar. We saw more interest, of course, on the mobile app solution during COVID, because of course people couldn't. It just highlighted what we talked about a little earlier, that you could now buy gold digitally, not have to leave your house, do it from the comfort of your home 24/7. And so this only, I think, helped accelerate that. And I think will only continue to accelerate as a result of that, because of the cost of going to the store and time and the fees that you'd have to pay. So that convenience or ease of use was very powerful, and I think COVID only helped to exemplify that. I think that translated for us onto the other side too. We were about less than 20 people prior to COVID, and we're over 100 people post-COVID. So that also shows you that not only did we need to grow, but we were able to hire in an entirely virtual type of environment where most of the people that work with us, I'd say 90%, I've not met in the past 2 years in person. It's only been through a through video. So I think that was another impact of COVID. And then I think the third thing as a result of COVID was it made it easier for me to make that business decision that we would be a remote uh, operating company rather than a physical location based company. And so, in fact, as a result of that, we have people in 8 different countries across the world, biggest ones being India, the US, and Serbia. That's where we have the largest pools of people, but we also have people in the United Kingdom, in various countries in the Middle East, and Switzerland. So we have people in a lot of different places, and making that decision that we could work remotely made it much easier to hire talented people from all across the world at the end of the day.
Now, I would also like to ask few questions around the personal side of being an entrepreneur. Can you tell us how do you stay energetic and consistent throughout time? So when you are an entrepreneur, you are expected to stay energetic and consistent. And when you feel tired, restless, and you lose focus, the business might also suffer. So how do you make sure uh, you stay consistent, and how do you deal with situations where you lose focus?
Yeah, so these are of course natural challenges that everybody goes through, whether you're an entrepreneur or any other business person. So for me, so part of it is time with my family. Um, so I've got 3 kids and wife, so I spend time with them. Part of it is just free time, doing really little or nothing, just relaxation. Part of it is working out. So I try to work out pretty regularly, most every day in some way. Part of it is I also have a puppy. Part of it is walking the puppy. So it's a combination of all these different things that help give you some sanity and give you free time to think about really nothing or to be able to try to remove yourself from the day-to-day throes of your business. And so I try to leverage all four of them in different ways and at different times, but on a pretty regular basis. So every one of them kind of applies on a daily basis. I do work pretty hard and put in a fair bit of time, but um, I think you have to find the right balance for you at the end of the day, and I try to find balance in both of those things, and have something to do outside of just pure work.
Mm. Okay. How do you define the term entrepreneur? What is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I see it as somebody um, who desires to build something new that can solve a problem for a customer or for an audience. And so, and then I knew it doesn't mean they have to invent something. It could just be repackaging a bunch of other things in a better way. But it's really about solving a problem that exists that they identify. And often the entrepreneur has some close attachment to it. It relates to them on a personal level or a financial level. There's something that makes them that unique person to be able to do it. Um, you know, um, and then I think the last piece is the ones that are really good. Usually, it's because people, when they look back afterwards, say that was obvious. Why didn't I think of that? And so sometimes it's things that were sort of what I'd call hidden in plain sight. and afterwards people realized that, but this was so useful, why didn't I think about it? But I think it really starts with people who are problem solvers for something that the community, um, um, the cohort or the people in the world could benefit from. And it doesn't have to be for billions of people. It could be for 100 people. I mean, that can still be entrepreneurship, and that you're solving a problem for 100 people. That's still, that counts too. So it's not about whether it became huge or not. And I think there's millions of them. There's millions of people who are doing this at the end of the day. And and then finally they're probably pursuing a dream, to their own personal dream, to be able to be in control of their destiny, to offer a good work environment for other people, and to give them an opportunity to be successful as well. And so I think that also comes hand in hand. But some people are entrepreneurs and they only have one or two people on their team, and you're still an entrepreneur.
That is so true. My final question to you: tell us about the different lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our life and our ventures.
So we already spoke about the mistakes, but I feel one of the most important things you can do if you're an entrepreneur is you have to focus on the culture of your company. You have to be really, really clear about why it is that you're doing what it is. So there should be a very clear purpose or vision or mission for the company, and that should be the North Star. Um, Things that can't be the North Star is making money or becoming huge or exit strategies. These are all a waste of time. This is not what an entrepreneur is about. It's about solving a problem for the client and having a vision and mission that I'm going to do something to make the world a better place. And so I think if you start with that, and then you make sure that you attract people who are like-minded, who want to do similar things as you to help the community, you probably won 90% of the battle. The rest will take care of itself. If you're doing something that's going to be helpful to people and you're really focused on it, it's going to work out. But if you're focused on other things like personal financial gain or hiring 10,000 people or getting listed on a, in a public way, whatever, these are not the recipes for success at the end of the day.
Well, on this note, we have come to the end of our discussion. Uh, Thanks for sharing lovely insights on gold and about your entrepreneurial journey. It was a pleasure to host you, and thanks for your time, Ashraf. I would say my best wishes for all the ventures that you're building.
Thanks, Priya. I appreciate you having me on. And at Gilded, we're trying to we're making gold functional. So I hope that will be helpful to our audience. And remember, it's all about making it digital, mobile, and usable. And you can go download the app, follow us. We'd love to have you involved if we can be helpful to your personal financial journey.